Welcome to Across the Curve.
When you line up safety, leadership, and excellence, that opens the door for lots of guests. And I personally feel that, there can't be a more valiant effort in the world than to protect and save lives. We hope the time that you spend with us will help you to understand how the future of work is shifting and what we can expect the workplace to look like in the coming years. Our guest today is Elliot Massey. Our guest today is Michael Ioffe. Angel is the VP of Global Human Resources at AdCourt Incorporated. Don is an executive safety and risk management professional with 4 decades of experience. Chester has been called the Apostle of Appreciation by Canada's Globe and Mail. Derek is an Emmy award-winning writer, producer, director, and actor. We hope the time you spend with us will help you to understand how storytelling is a key to learning.
Boy, storytelling is a wonderful topic, and let's explore the story.
Welcome to Across the Curve with Craig Sexton. Sponsored by DSS Plus, transforming business results through the development of a safe, efficient, and capable workforce. DSS Plus, protect, transform, sustain. Your host today has over 3 decades of experience in the entertainment industry from Los Angeles to New York. He is an award-winning writer, producer, and director. He has been recognized for his extensive work around the affective approach and communicating from the heart. He brings his talents to bear at DSS Plus with breakthroughs in communication, employee engagement, and culture transformation. He is everybody's best friend and soon to be yours. Craig Sexton.
Okay, well, welcome to Across the Curve podcast. I'm Craig Sexton, the Global Creative Director at DSS Plus. We hope the time that you spend with us will help you to understand how the future of work is shifting and what we can expect the workplace to look like in the coming years. But before we jump in, I want to introduce my producer extraordinaire, Jay Gates. How are you, Jay?
Hey, Craig. How are you? It's good to see you, buddy. It's another fine day.
It's good to see you. What's up with you this morning?
Oh, nothing much. I was putting together everything, everything that it takes to make a successful video podcast. So, of course, we've got our information, we've got our setup, we've got our cameras, and we've got our coffee. And I'm sporting this mug that I just got today. It's got a very, very nice quote. It says, "Don't worry about a thing, because every little thing is going to be all right. XO Bob." So.
That would be Mr. Marley. That's probably some good advice, too, although... I have my coffee mug here, but I'm just not, I only do 1 cup of coffee in the mornings now, Jay, because I'm already so amped up for our guest today. And, when I go to 2 or 3 cups of coffee, I don't know that I could keep it all together. I'd be too amped up. But it is interesting that we got such a good little piece of advice off of your coffee mug, because we're going to be talking to somebody who knows a lot about short messaging. Now, I think his messaging might be a little more profound than what we find on coffee cups, but I'm really excited to have our guest with us today. I think it's going to be a great show.
Yeah. It's going to be awesome. And just to make sure we tell everybody to stay on a little bit afterwards, we have a little segment that we call the cleanup. That's where I fact check Craig and make sure that everything he says was completely 100% accurate and truthful. And we also, we share some insights about talking with our guest, and we do that at the end of every episode. So I really look forward to that because.
Yeah, so stay with us. It's always fun to find out what I didn't say correct or what Jay needs to fix.
Oh yeah.
So that'll be a fun little time. Stay with us after the show for that. But our guest today is Michael Ioffe. Michael is the co-founder and CEO of one of our partners here at DSS Plus, Arist, a platform that helps companies like Amazon and Intel deliver learning, nudges, and communications in the workflow of Microsoft Teams, Slack, and text message. By meeting people where they are, Arist makes learning far more accessible and effective. Prior to Arist, Michael founded Tile.org, one of the world's largest entrepreneurship education nonprofits. Michael has been named a Forbes 30 under 30 for his pioneering work on learning accessibility. Welcome to the show, Michael. We're delighted to have you on the podcast. How are you, buddy?
Phenomenal. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Great to see you.
It's great to see you too, but I noticed that you don't look like you're in your normal location in your office today. Where are you?
Sure thing. So I'm visiting a friend of mine in LA, and he very generously offered to let me stay at his place. So I'm staying in his sister's room, and so her decor is far, far better than mine.
I'm not sure about that, but nonetheless, it's great to have you here. You look great. I'm excited to have you on the show. Well, hey, Michael, let's just jump right in. I think our audience, for those viewing that can see you, and those that are listening in, Forbes 30 under 30, you probably are one of the youngest CEOs that I've ever done a podcast with. So tell me, how did the journey get you here at such a young age?
Yeah, sure thing. So essentially, I've been really, really interested in educational accessibility for as long as I can remember. And for some additional context, my parents are both refugees from Ukraine and Latvia. And so for me, growing up, I saw firsthand the impact that educational accessibility had on their well-being, right? I saw that educational opportunities made a huge difference in their lives, and lack of educational opportunities also held them back in certain ways as well. And so I was really, really fascinated by how we could make learning more accessible, especially to folks who may not have traditional access to education. And so in high school, I really wanted to learn about entrepreneurship, realized there was a huge gap because there were no entrepreneurship classes in my high school or in my district at the time. And so I ended up creating a series of free live events where we'd bring in local entrepreneurs and students and just host free conversations once a month. Um, and we got a local theater to donate their basement, and we would host these events once a month, and they became incredibly successful. And so that was sort of my first experience trying to make learning more accessible to folks. And what we found is that after about a year, we had over 1,000 students attend these events. And so I put together a manual for how to host these free live conversations, started sending it to students around the world. And one of our locations was in the war zone in Yemen. And I couldn't understand why we were getting more students to come to our events in Yemen than our events in Portland or Boston or LA. And what I started realizing was that in Yemen, students were desperate for learning resources because, by that time, Yemen had been in a state of crisis for over 4 years. And
Right.
so there were no textbooks, limited access to the internet, very, very limited sort of resource environment in general. And so that's sort of how Arist started. And that's when we started realizing that by delivering learning via text message, we could make learning far more accessible. And then we'll talk about the rest from there. But that's kind of how at 23, I ended up running Arist.
Oh, wow. What an incredible story. Well, hey, look, it is really great to have you here, as I said. And I think so many people are going to be interested about this topic today, about this short, kind of different way to learn. But I really want to start off with, how is Gen Z changing or shifting the future of learning and of work in general?
Yeah, great question. So if you think about the platforms that Gen Z spends a lot of time on, right? Platforms like TikTok and like Twitter, I think there's often a misconception that those platforms succeed because the content is more bite-sized. And the reality is that's not really the case, right? The reason those platforms succeed is because Gen Z has a really, really high BS filter, right? To sort of put it more crudely, right? And so what happens is that within the first 8 seconds of a member of Gen Z viewing a video or engaging with a piece of content, they decide whether or not they're willing to engage. And so what happens is that in most cases, most of the content that we see, that's not on TikTok and not on Twitter and not on YouTube, the first 8 seconds aren't all that engaging. And so what happens is that we see incredibly high drop-offs in terms of knowledge retention and engagement and even adoption, because the content is not designed to be engaging in the first 8 seconds. And so I think what Gen Z is doing is, sure, content is becoming more bite-sized, which I think is a good thing, right? It forces people to condense content into more thoughtful bites. But I think what's really changing is the fact that we have a higher standard for the quality of content, especially in those first 8 to 10 seconds. We're really explaining why something matters to somebody.
Well, why don't we just back up a little bit, right? So we jumped in kind of deep already. I totally get what you're saying, right? I mean, there's so much data behind what happens when people are engaged with content and where their sweet spot lives and where they start dropping off at. Seems like today that time is getting shorter and shorter. But really, what I'm interested in is talk to us about what is the power of text-based learning, and tell our audience really what is it all about. I mean, you're one of the pioneers in this field. Now, I've had the privilege of actually taking some of your text-based courses. I think they're fantastic, but can you just explain what Arist actually does, how they deliver content, how they deliver learning?
Yeah, sure thing. So essentially, what Arist does is we help organizations take longer learning experiences and break them down into bite-sized interactive chunks that are spaced out over time, right? So a good example: instead of taking a course on how to be an effective first-time manager over the course of 4 hours via video, um, we'll deliver courses in bite-sized chunks that are 5 minutes a day, delivered on tools people already use, right? So text message, Slack, Microsoft Teams, WhatsApp. And we'll deliver it in bite-sized chunks spaced out over the course of a few weeks. Right? And so that way, instead of inundating the manager with 4 hours of content that they are going to forget and that they will likely not really engage in, right? We deliver the right learning in the right place in the right time over a longer period of time. And what we find is that there's a bunch of research from Stanford and UPenn and Harvard about how making learning more bite-sized and spacing out over time has incredible knowledge retention and behavior change effects. So what we do is we just take all of that research and make it really, really easy for organizations to build, launch, and track bite-sized experiences in the flow of work. That's sort of how it works in a nutshell.
Right. So, moving kind of through, there's so many questions I want to ask you about how you deliver this work, right? These text-based learning, but what content should and shouldn't be delivered in the flow of work?
Yeah, great question. So look, I think if we step back a bit, you know, anybody can send text messages, right? That in itself is not super hard. When you send it at scale, it gets hard, right? We send I think, about 1 million messages a month. That gets more complicated. But the reality is that what really, really matters is how you send the messages and what you put in and how everything is structured. And so what we find is that the learning design has to be incredibly intentional to create meaningful learning impact. And in terms of what content is and isn't a good fit, based on our research, what we found is that content that's more foundational and that's designed to be continuous, right? Anything where the knowledge itself is not super complex, but you really need people to practice it over time. That ends up being a great fit for Eris and for message-based learning, right? And so those types of use cases include foundational DEI, foundational onboarding, values training, foundational leadership, and people skill development, right? Anything that takes folks from 0 to 1. What we find is that when we need to take folks from 1 to 10 on a subject, right, like start to build mastery and expertise, that's when we need to dive into the LMS or dive into other content. But we find is that for 0 to 1, which is really 80% of what most L&D orgs deliver, that type of content is really best suited for message-based learning.
Yeah. So, hey, Michael, you started to talk about research. So I'm sure everybody listening is interested, shaking their heads, thinking,
Yeah.
wow, how could I use text-based learning? But really, what is the research behind message-based learning? And I think we're calling it message-based and replacing the word text-based learning now.
Yeah. What we find is that, our goal is to meet people where they are, wherever they are. And so for folks on the front lines, that may be text message or WhatsApp. For folks in the office, that may be Microsoft Teams or Slack.
Sure.
So yeah, variety of message-based mediums. Yes. So the research behind message-based learning is pretty interesting, right? There was 2 studies in particular that stand out. One was a study done in 1999 and 2000 by a group of folks at Harvard, indicating that if you take learning, break it down into bite-sized chunks and space it out over time, the knowledge retention benefits are significant, right? People will actually remember what they've learned, because today, if somebody exits, a day-long workshop, they forget everything they learned right, in just a few weeks. The knowledge retention of most learning experiences today is not great. And so what they found is that, hey, if we make learning bite sized and make it really easy to digest learning and space it out over time, then the impact is really significant. A study done by Stanford in 2014 found that, based on that, if you do the same thing but then deliver learning via tools people already use, the behavior change impact is huge, right? So this is actually crazy, right? So parents who got a series of messages uh, about how to be good at facilitating their children's literacy, right? How to help their children read, tips and tricks and guidance with some interactivity. Those parents saw a significant increase in the literacy rate of their children, right? So that means that something as simple as sending a text message not only has meaningful first order behavior change effects where the parent is taking a more active role in the literacy of their kids, but it actually has meaningful second order behavior change effects because the literacy of their children actually increases, right? So what we're finding is that, for most learning experiences, knowledge retention and behavior change matter a lot in terms of outcomes, right? Those are really the outcomes that we're trying to create. And both of those are oftentimes done far better in a message-based medium.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, how will text-based learning change the future of training?
Yeah, sure thing. I think today what we find is that there's a lot of trainings being delivered that really shouldn't be delivered in the format they're being delivered in, right?
Right.
Today, if we look at sort of the mediums that as training professionals we have to work with, we're really limited to content in an LMS and live experiences, right? That's really it. And so for us, one of our goals is to sort of create a third option where we believe that a lot of content really shouldn't be delivered in LMS and shouldn't be delivered live because it wastes people's time and it's not efficient or effective, right? And so our goal is that when people go into the LMS or go into a live session, that content is specifically designed for that format and is really, really powerful, right? Whereas content that can be delivered in the flow of tools we already use should be delivered on those tools, right? And so I think for us, it's really about giving people a third option and letting people be really, really intentional about what content fits where, and ensuring that we're not only saving people's time, but also making training that actually sticks and actually leaves some sort of behavior change. Because, for a lot of these really, really critical trainings like safety training, right, and like harassment prevention training and leadership training, people need to remember this stuff, right? And the behavior needs to change.
Yeah. So how's your reception been like in organizations? What's been the kind of the pushback or the pinch point, or what's the gateway? Like, how are you getting in to organizations that you're working with? I mean, these are some, big names that you're working with, Intel and Amazon and Microsoft. So how did you find an entry point in there to say, hey, I want to talk to you about a different kind of way to learn or train?
Yeah, great question. So look, people are always really, really skeptical, right? Because when you tell them that, hey, I'm going to teach you by sending you a bunch of text messages, people think that's absolutely insane, right? And to be honest, when we started Arist, we thought it was insane as well. We really had no other option, right? Like for the students that we were trying to reach, this was literally the last place that we could reach people on, right? That everybody actually had access to. And I think that the point that shifts is when people actually have a chance to try and experience, they get it, right? As soon as people try and experience, they're like, oh, wow, like this makes a ton of sense. And so essentially what we really focus on is how can we, work with people who really understand that something's not working, right? That something within their training organization is maybe like not delivering the results that they want. And how can we let them really try an Arist experience firsthand or try a message-based experience firsthand and get an understanding of the impact that it can have. And what we find is that when people try it, they get it pretty immediately. And in terms of, how we scale within organizations, we find is that there's a natural virality because there's such a huge desire and demand for better training experiences for most employees, right? And so a lot of that just comes down to us being able to give that experience, give people a taste of it, and letting them sort of, bring it to other teams from there.
Right. Look, hey, I've taken several courses on your platform. And one of the things that I found really interesting about taking the courses was you got to pick your time, right? So you could actually pick the time of day that you wanted to receive the message-based learning. And so, I would pick a certain time, and then I got to be honest with you, after several days, I was kind of like, "Oh, when's it coming? When's it coming? Oh, there it is." And then, I kind of enjoyed the 5-minute break or 10-minute break in my day where I got to take it, and I knew it wasn't going to last long. What is the average length of how long this message-based learning should last? Like, so when I got mine, I think was doing mine, right after my morning coffee. And so, what's the average time though?
Yeah, great question. So we recommend keeping each lesson or each interaction, because you can text back answers and get feedback, to about 5 minutes. And so yeah, what we find is that letting people schedule their course, letting people pick their time and pick their preferred messaging platform makes a huge difference, because people are setting the terms of their own experience, right? So for us, what we find is in terms of duration, we've had clients deliver courses for 90 or 180 days, right, for onboarding experiences, for example. But we recommend 5 to 10 days for most sort of standard experiences. The really cool thing is, as you mentioned, it builds a habit, right? You get used to
Right.
getting new content at the same time, and so people end up, really, really loving it and also missing it when it's gone.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I got to be honest with you. I kind of looked forward to it, and there was this sense of accomplishment, right? I'm a list maker. I love to, I make a list, and then, that's how I get things done and checking things off my list. And I really felt like it was one of those things that I was actually, checking off my list every day. So, but and I also felt like there was a little bit of gamification in it. Now, the course I took wasn't really a gamified course, but it still had that sense that I was, all right, I've got to accomplish this task. I've got to get X amount of answers right. So, is there game? Does that play a role in it?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think the cool thing is that yeah, there is some natural gamification in the product, because we're giving folks 5 minutes to engage in something, and we give them instant feedback when they do. We're adding in more gamification over the course of the next few quarters. Adding in leaderboards and sort of other stuff like that. But yeah, I think what we find is that people really want to learn, right? Gamification, I think, is often used as a way to drive folks to engage or adopt. But the reality is, people want to learn. It's just that our delivery mechanisms and our mediums for how we're delivering learning to people aren't meeting them where they are, and aren't really thinking about how people spend their time, right? And so what we find is that if we can just fit learning into people's lives, then the necessity of getting folks to engage through gamification kind of diminishes as well.
Yeah, I think that's really the key, right? Is meeting people where they are in a way that they can learn. Are you finding that that this has a sweet spot in terms of age, or is it being adopted and accepted from, baby boomers all the way to Gen Z?
Yeah, awesome question. So when we started Eris, we had a strong assumption that this would really only be a tool that Gen Z and millennials would use and would like. We were incredibly wrong, which is super fascinating. And so what we found was that actually folks over the age of 60 prefer Eris by a few percentage points to folks under the age of 60. Right? Generally, satisfaction rates across the board are incredibly high, but there is a slight difference, and we couldn't really understand why. And what we started realizing was that, for many people, text messages are how they interact with their family members, with their spouse, with their kids, with their grandkids, right? It's a very natural medium. And it, in many ways, it's the lowest common denominator in terms of technology that we all use, right? Pretty much everybody texts. And so as a result, it's oftentimes a far more comfortable medium for folks than a really complicated online platform, right? And so it is interesting, because it's a bit counterintuitive, but we found that the satisfaction rates are pretty consistent across the board, and higher for some populations that we didn't think would love it as much.
Well, what are one of those populations that you didn't think would love it as much?
Yeah, I think in general, we really assume that folks who may have had limited technological access historically, right, or folks in certain age groups wouldn't love learning via messages as much. But we found that across the board, because it just meets people where they are, and because people can set the terms of their experience, makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this, Michael. What's been the hardest part of building Air so far?
Awesome question. I think honestly, getting people over the skepticism of delivering learning via messages. That's like the first step, right? Is kind of always the hardest. Um, and we still have people that at conferences will come up to us and say, why do you think that this would ever work, right?
Right.
And like, well, we have millions of data points at this point, but I think that's been the hardest part of building Eris, is sort of the we really feel like we are having to shift the culture of how learning has been delivered, and that's a big ship to shift, right? It really feels like kind of churning a very very sizable cruise ship, but yeah, but I think apart from that, we as a business started in the midst of the pandemic, right? And then, now we're sort of entering a unique recessionary period. So we, as a business, we've even though we've been around for just a few years, we've experienced some interesting macroeconomic times. So I think that's made it a bit more interesting, just in terms of building the business.
Yeah, I can imagine. Look, hey, I know for us and my organization, and even for me personally, right? I had the same reaction. We're busy. That just sounds crazy. But finally, after a couple of conversations with you, when you started to show us the research behind it and show us the retention behind it, and then finally, I said, just send me a course. I'll take a course. And that's really all it took. So, to our listeners out there who are listening to the podcast, I can't highly recommend this enough. Reach out to Arist, talk to Michael, talk to his company, let them send you a course, try to learn something through message-based learning. It's really fun. I can't tell you how much I recommend it, and how just I really think you're on the cutting edge. So talking about the cutting edge, so what's on the horizon? Like, what are you most excited about right now that's coming up for you guys?
Yeah, sure. So two things that we're super excited about. One is automations, right? I think one of the cool things is that when the atomic unit of learning shifts from becoming 30 minutes to becoming this bite-sized 5-minute experience, we can embed learning much more seamlessly into the flow of life. And so for us, what that means is that is sort of being able to pull data from the organization, right? Pull data from HRIS systems, pull data from tools like Salesforce, and then automatically trigger the right learning in the right place in the right time. So a good example is if you are promoted to be a manager in a tool like Workday, for example, our goal is that we can automatically trigger a learning experience in the flow of Teams, for example,
Right.
automatically trigger a new manager learning experience, right? And so that way, learning is fully contextual to the shifts that are happening in the organization or the data that we're pulling from within the organization. So that's the first thing, is just being able to make learning far more contextual and automate a lot of those processes through really thoughtful integrations. The second thing that we're really interested in is using natural language AI to auto generate course experiences. I think there's been some incredible innovations in natural language AI and in large language models over the course of the past few years, especially over the course of the past 12 months. And it's been really, really interesting because we're already starting to generate really, really high quality learning experiences via AI. Not something we'll probably publicly release for a very long time, but it's been really, really interesting to see how much AI can support, and really give learning designers superpowers by helping build courses far faster.
Yep. Hey, well, Michael, look, you're kind of the guru and the king of short messaging. So, if you had a billboard, right? If I gave you your own billboard on the side of the freeway, what would it say?
Sure thing. Well, first off, meet people where they are. Right. I think that's sort of the thing that we found is absolutely critical. That's sort of the mindset shift that needs to happen, right? In L&D and training more broadly. I think if we were targeting instructional designers, it would just be right shorter, right? I mean, what we find is that.
Right, shorter. I
Yep.
can see that billboard.
Yep. Yep. The hardest. So it's funny. We'll do these really comprehensive onboarding and training sessions for instructional designers. And there's this exercise that we do where we take like a 3 or 4 paragraph block of text, and then people compete to see how much they can condense it, right?
Oh, that's a great exercise.
Oh yeah, it's tons of fun. And somebody got it down to 54 characters without losing any of the substance, right? 3 paragraphs to 54 characters, right? And so what we find is that writing concisely matters a ton. And that's sort of the skill that, if I could recommend anybody like learn one skill, it's write really, really concisely.
Right shorter. I like that. Hey, Michael, it has been a pleasure having you here with us today. Thanks so much for being on the podcast. I know you're super busy and I really do appreciate your time. But once again, from everybody here and my team, thank you for giving us an hour of your day. We really appreciate it. You've been awesome. Anything you want to say before you go?
No, thank you so much for having me. Yep, phenomenal seeing you, and this has been a great time.
Yeah, it's been great for me. It's great seeing you again, too, Michael. And again, go check out Arist Platform. That's spelled Arist. They are an extraordinary company. Michael's a great guy. He can walk you through it step by step. And before we get out of here, I want to give a special thanks to our producer, Jay Gates, and to the rest of the DSS Plus team who made the podcast possible. And if you found the information and insights of this podcast helpful, please share it with others. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you find your podcast. Across the Curve was brought to you by DSS Plus. And for more information, just go to consultdss.com. That's CONSULT DSS.com. I'm Craig Sexton, and that's how the story was told to me, and now it's been told to you. Take care.
All right, here we are. Welcome to The Cleanup. We know this segment is where I get to reevaluate the entire podcast you just saw and see if I can go and find anything that Craig got wrong and try to correct him and make sure that everything was completely factual.
Yeah, that's generally not very hard for you. I mean, it just takes one quick review, and you can usually pull out half a dozen things where I've gotten off track or exaggerated. How did I do, Jay? But
hey, buddy, I'm not gonna. Hey, this you're actually pretty spot on. I couldn't find anything that warranted correction on this one. I mean, it was overall just a great interview, and a lot of it was about Michael and Arist and what they did. So I know he's not going to get anything wrong on that, and of course, working with him, I know you're not going to get anything wrong either. So no, it was just a great podcast through and through. Nothing I can bring up.
I thought it was a great podcast. I really enjoy Michael. I think he's such a good speaker and delivers his information in such kind of just a concise, very easy to digest kind of way. I mean, every time I hear Michael talk, I'm thinking, yeah, that makes sense. I like it. I like everything about it. And something that our listeners might not know that I'd like to just point out is that Arist is a partner of DSS Plus. We actually partner with them and work with our clients along with Arist to deliver content in this bite-sized text-based or message-based delivery. So for all of you out there listening that are really interested in what Michael had to say or wanting to know how you can train or deliver information message based in these small bite-sized chunks every day, I can tell you that it is a really fantastic delivery system. But you can contact us at consultdss.com, and we will work with you on developing a course and connecting you with Michael because we're partners with them. But all in all, Jay, I mean, one of my favorite interviews. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love how young he is and how much knowledge he has at that age. I wish I had anything like that when I was his age.
Yeah, by far, probably the youngest CEO that we've had the pleasure of having on our podcast.
I mean, we got to have him back.
We will definitely have him back. We've already received people wanting to talk more just about him and what he's doing. So we'll put him on our list to bring back someday.
Yeah, I wonder whose place he'll be at next time because I know he's at a friend's house in the back room. So it's like, hey, maybe next time. You never know. It's just, where in the world is Michael Ioffe?
He did it. Yeah, he did his interview from a friend's bedroom out in Los Angeles. That was interesting. But he's such a great guy. But I had a good time. And look, the cleanup is very short today because it's a rarity when I can get through an hour without a mistake. So, Jay, I think the scoreboard reads 1 for me today.
Yeah, I think it does. Next time we can get a scoreboard going for you. But thanks for making my job easy.
There you go.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. Well, look, hey, thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks for staying tuned to the cleanup. Although we didn't have much to clean up, and I want to say thank you for watching. If you want more information about what we're doing or how you can move across the curve, go to consultdss.com. Jay, thanks for being here, buddy.
My absolute pleasure. Cheers. See you next
All
time.
right. See you next time.